police officer seizes a parrot that had been by an elderly woman's side for 70 years. You won't believe how this story ends. Before the story begins, comment below which city you're watching this video from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Enjoy the story, everyone. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Eleanor's modest cottage, casting dappled patterns across the worn hardwood floors of her Key West home. At 90 years old, Eleanor Harper moved slowly but deliberately, her wrinkled hands preparing a bowl of fresh mangoes and papayas. From the open window came a flutter of emerald wings as Sam, her Amazon parrot, returned from his morning exploration of the neighborhood. "There you are, my handsome boy," Eleanor cooed as Sam landed gracefully on her outstretched arm, his vibrant feathers a stark contrast against her pale skin. "Did you have a nice flight?" Sam bobbed his head and let out a perfect whistle of the first few notes of America the Beautiful, a trick Eleanor's father had taught him 70 years ago. The bird's intelligence still amazed her, even after their lifetime together. Eleanor had received Sam as a gift on her 20th birthday, back when her father returned from a merchant marine voyage to South America. She remembered that day vividly, the tiny green bird peering cautiously from his temporary box. How frightened she'd been of hurting him. Her father had insisted she never cage him. "Birds are meant to fly, Ellie," he'd said. "Give him love and freedom, and he'll choose to stay." For 7 decades, that's exactly what had happened. Together, they'd weathered the loss of Eleanor's husband, Frank, 30 years ago. The moves from their original home in Chicago to Florida, when the winters became too harsh for her bones, and the gradual isolation that came with outliving most friends and family. Their daily routine was simple but comforting. Mornings began with fresh fruit for both of them. Sam would fly around the neighborhood during the day, sometimes perching in the mango tree in the back garden, other times visiting neighboring porches where residents would offer him bits of treats. Everyone in their small beach community knew Sam belonged to the Bird Lady on Duval Street. As Eleanor settled into her rocking chair on the porch, Sam perched on her shoulder, nuzzling against her silver hair. The familiarity of his weight there gave her more comfort than any medicine could. "Mrs. Harper, how's the prettiest lady on the block today?" called Hector, the mail carrier, as he approached the porch. "Flattery will get you everywhere, young man," Eleanor replied with a chuckle. "Sam and I are just enjoying the morning breeze." "Hello, hello, got any mail?" Sam squawked, mimicking the phrase he'd heard thousands of times. "Sure do, buddy." Hector laughed, extending an envelope toward the bird, who promptly took it in his beak and delivered it to Eleanor's lap. It was a ritual they'd performed for years. Little did Eleanor know that this peaceful rhythm of her days was about to be shattered. As Hector waved goodbye and continued his route, a white SUV with government plates turned onto her street, carrying 2 uniformed officers from the Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission. Someone had filed a complaint about the illegal exotic bird being kept in the neighborhood, and they were coming to investigate. The officers parked directly in front of Eleanor's house, checking the address against their paperwork. Eleanor, seeing the official vehicle, felt a faint tremor in her hands, the same instinctive unease that had followed her through decades of witnessing how bureaucracy could upend ordinary lives without warning. "Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission," announced the taller officer, adjusting his cap against the bright morning sun. His badge read, "Officer Reynolds. We've received a report about an illegal exotic bird at this address." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Sam, sensing her distress, hopped nervously on her shoulder. "There must be some mistake," Eleanor said, her voice wavering. "Sam has been with me for 70 years. My father brought him home in 1955. The second officer, a younger woman named Martinez, consulted her tablet. "Ma'am, according to our records, you don't have a permit for keeping a native protected species. Amazon parrots fall under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and require proper documentation." "Permit? I've never needed a permit. Sam isn't caged. He's free to come and go as he pleases." Eleanor felt her world tilting sideways as Officer Reynolds produced a transport carrier. "Please, he's like family. He's all I have left." "I understand this is upsetting, but we're just following protocol," Officer Martinez said, her voice softening slightly. "Someone filed a formal complaint, and we're required to investigate." "Who would complain?" "Everyone here knows Sam," Eleanor protested, tears welling in her eyes. Both officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. "The complaints are confidential, ma'am. When Officer Reynolds extended his arm toward Sam, the parrot shrieked and flew to the living room, perching on the back of Eleanor's favorite chair, the one facing the window where they watched sunsets together. "Please don't take him," Eleanor begged, following them inside. "He won't survive without me. And her voice broke. "I don't know if I'll survive without him." Despite her pleas and Sam's desperate attempts to evade capture, the officers were determined. With practiced movements, they managed to secure the frightened bird in the carrier. Sam's frantic wings beat against the plastic walls, his calls echoing through the small house. "You'll receive notice of a hearing date," Officer Martinez explained, handing Eleanor a stack of forms. "You can petition for his return at that time, but you'll need to demonstrate proper permits and facilities." After they left, Eleanor stood motionless on her porch, staring at the empty space where the government SUV had been. The forms trembled in her hand, incomprehensible legal jargon swimming before her tear-filled eyes. Inside, the silence was deafening. For the first time in 7 decades, there was no greeting whistle when she entered a room, no gentle weight landing on her shoulder. Sam's perch stood empty by the window. His favorite toys, a small bell, a knotted rope, and a mirror, lay scattered across the sideboard where he liked to play. The bowl of fresh fruit she'd prepared that morning remained untouched. Eleanor couldn't bring herself to clear it away. Moving anything of Sam's felt like admitting he might never return. Days passed in a fog of grief. Eleanor barely ate, barely slept. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles and concern, but their well-intentioned words couldn't penetrate her despair. She left the windows open, hoping against hope that somehow Sam would find his way back to her. One afternoon, she found herself wandering the streets of Key West aimlessly, having forgotten where she was headed. The vibrant tourist district with its colorful shops and bustling cafes felt hollow and meaningless, without Sam's commentary on her shoulder. "Eleanor? Eleanor Harper." A voice broke through her haze as she sat disoriented on a bench in the town square. Looking up, she saw Martha Wilson, a retired school teacher who lived 2 blocks over. "I've been calling your name for a minute now. Are you all right? Where's Sam?" With tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, Eleanor recounted the events of that terrible morning to Martha, how the officers had taken Sam, how empty her house felt, how the silence was slowly crushing her spirit. Martha listened intently, her posture straightening with indignation as the story unfolded. When Eleanor finished, Martha took her hands firmly. "This isn't right," Martha declared, her teacher's voice commanding attention. "You need help, Eleanor. Legal help. My nephew's friend is an environmental attorney, Michael Thompson. He's helped with cases like this before." "I can't afford a lawyer," Eleanor sighed, pulling her cardigan tighter despite the warm Florida afternoon. "Let me call him. At least talk to him," Martha insisted. "You're not wrong here, Eleanor. 70 years of companionship means something. The law should recognize that." That evening, Martha accompanied Eleanor home and made the call. Michael Thompson agreed to meet them the following morning, asking Eleanor to gather any evidence of her long relationship with Sam. Michael arrived promptly at 10, younger than Eleanor had expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He listened patiently as Eleanor shared her story, occasionally making notes in a leather-bound journal. "Mrs. Harper, this is exactly the kind of case that highlights the problem with blanket enforcement of wildlife regulations," Michael explained, setting down his coffee mug. "The laws are designed to protect animals from exploitation, not to separate them from loving homes where they've lived for decades." For the first time since Sam's seizure, a flicker of hope stirred in Eleanor's chest. "Do you think we can get him back?" "I've handled similar cases, though none with a 70-year history. That's exceptional," Michael replied thoughtfully. "We need to build a case demonstrating the unique bond between you and Sam, and the potential harm of separation to both of you." Over the next 2 weeks, Michael and Eleanor worked tirelessly. They gathered yellowed photographs showing Sam throughout the decades, perched on Eleanor's shoulder at her wedding, sitting on her husband Frank's finger years later, accompanying Eleanor to her teaching job at the local elementary school where she'd worked for 30 years. "I used to bring him for special occasions," Eleanor explained, showing Michael a photograph of Sam surrounded by delighted children. "He would say the Pledge of Allegiance with the class." The children loved it. Martha rallied neighborhood support, collecting testimonials from dozens of residents who had known Eleanor and Sam for years. Dr. Jimenez, Eleanor's physician, provided a letter detailing his concerns about her physical and emotional health since the separation. Companionship animals provide significant health benefits for elderly patients, he wrote. In Mrs. Harper's case, this relationship spans most of her lifetime and constitutes an essential emotional support system. Eleanor herself penned a heartfelt letter to the judge, her normally steady handwriting now shaky but determined. Your Honor, Sam isn't just a pet. He has been my constant companion through every joy and sorrow of my adult life. He was there when I received news of my husband's passing, offering comfort in ways only he could. He has never known a cage. He stays because he chooses to. Each morning when he returns from his flight, it's a choice made of love and trust. Please don't let bureaucracy destroy what 70 years of devotion has built. The night before the hearing, Eleanor could barely sleep. She sat in her rocking chair by the window, fingers tracing the smooth wood of Sam's perch. We're going to bring you home, she whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow we fight. The Monroe County Courthouse stood imposingly against the clear blue Key West sky. Eleanor had dressed carefully in her navy blue suit, the one she'd worn to her retirement party 15 years earlier. On her lapel gleamed a small golden pin shaped like a bird in flight, a gift from her father the same day he'd given her Sam. Michael greeted her on the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand. Martha and over a dozen neighbors had come to show support, forming a protective semicircle around Eleanor as they entered the building. The hearing room was smaller than Eleanor had imagined, with polished wood panels and the Florida state seal mounted behind the judge's bench. Representatives from the Wildlife Commission sat at one table, while Michael guided Eleanor to the other. Judge Gloria Ramirez, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, reviewed the documents before her. Case number 2025, ENV 1872, Harper versus Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission, she announced. This is a petition for the return of a protected species to private ownership. The Wildlife Commission's attorney presented their case first, citing regulations, presenting documentation of their seizure protocol, explaining the necessity of permits for protected species. The law is clear, he concluded. Regardless of how long Mrs. Harper has possessed this animal, keeping a native protected species without proper documentation is prohibited. When it was Michael's turn, he didn't argue technicalities. Instead, he presented Eleanor's story, how Sam had never been caged, how he'd chosen to stay with her for 70 years, how they'd moved together from Chicago to Key West. He showed the judge photographs spanning decades, presented the medical testimony, and called 3 neighbors to briefly describe the relationship they'd witnessed. Your Honor, Michael said, this isn't just about interpreting wildlife regulations. This is about recognizing when extraordinary circumstances require flexibility in applying those regulations. The spirit of these laws is to protect animals from exploitation and ensure their welfare. In this case, enforcement is causing demonstrable harm to both Mrs. Harper and Sam. When Eleanor was finally invited to speak, she rose slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the table for support. Your Honor, she began, her voice quiet but clear, I'm not here to ask for special treatment. I'm here to fight for what's right. Sam has been free to leave for 70 years, but he stays because we belong together. He's watched over me just as much as I've cared for him. The courtroom fell silent as Eleanor continued, her voice growing stronger. The officers who took him spoke about protocols and regulations. I understand those are important, but Sam isn't just a case number or a species classification. He's my family, the only family I have left. If the purpose of these laws is to protect animals, then I ask you to consider what's truly best for Sam. Judge Ramirez removed her glasses, studying Eleanor thoughtfully. Mrs. Harper, if I were to return Sam to your care, would you be willing to obtain the proper permits and allow periodic wellness checks? Of course, Your Honor, Eleanor replied without hesitation. I want what's best for Sam. I always have. After a brief recess, Judge Ramirez returned with her decision. In light of the exceptional circumstances of this case and the overwhelming evidence of a 70-year bond between Mrs. Harper and the parrot known as Sam, I am ordering his immediate return to Mrs. Harper's care, contingent upon completion of proper permitting, which this court will expedite. The judge looked directly at Eleanor. Mrs. Harper, your devotion to Sam is commendable. This court recognizes that sometimes the rigid application of law fails to serve justice. Today we've corrected that. 2 days later, a Wildlife Commission vehicle pulled up to Eleanor's cottage. This time Martha, Michael and several neighbors stood with her on the porch as Officer Martinez approached with the transport carrier. "Mrs. Harper," the officer said, "I have someone here who's been asking for you." When she opened the carrier door, Sam immediately burst out, wings outstretched. He circled once above the gathered crowd, then descended directly to Eleanor's outstretched arm, his talons gently gripping the familiar perch of her wrist. "Sam," Eleanor whispered, tears flowing freely as she cradled him close, feeling his heartbeat against her palm. "Welcome home, my dear friend." Sam tilted his head, regarding her with his intelligent eyes, then gently pressed his beak to her forehead, a gesture of affection they'd shared thousands of times before. Then, in his perfect mimicry, he whistled the first notes of America the Beautiful, just as he had on countless mornings throughout their shared life. The neighbors applauded, Martha wiped tears from her eyes, and Michael smiled at the reunited pair. This victory represented more than just one woman and her beloved Parrot. It stood for the recognition that love and companionship, in whatever form they take, deserve protection and respect. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across her porch, Eleanor sat in her rocking chair, Sam perched contentedly on her shoulder. His weight felt right, familiar, the missing piece restored to its proper place. Together they watched the sky turn to gold, then crimson, then deep purple, just as they had for 70 years, and just as they would continue to do for whatever time they had left together. Thank you so much for making it this far. We hope Eleanor and Sam's story touched your heart today. If their journey of love, separation and reunion moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It helps us bring more of these emotional stories to life every day. What did you think about Eleanor's fight for her beloved Sam? Would you have done the same for someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to check out our other heartwarming stories about bonds that transcend time, challenges and even species. See you tomorrow with another unforgettable tale.